Hello and welcome back to Rocket Pod. On today's show we're joined by Chris Connors. Chris has a successful number of hair salons in the southeast of England called CoCo's Style. He also runs a successful hairdressing academy, as well as being the founder of the CoCo Foundation. CoCo Foundation is dedicated to providing food and shelter for children in South Africa and other parts of the continent. Really excited to have Chris on today and learn about his journey as both an entrepreneur and the operator of the CoCo Foundation. Such great work. Welcome, Chris. How are you doing this afternoon?
Hi, good. Thank you very much. I'm well, thank you, on this chilly cold day, but yeah, I'm cool. Thank you.
So can you kind of take us back to kind of your childhood? So how did you kind of reach the point of founding CoCo Foundation? So if you just kind of take us on a bit of a journey, where did
sure.
Chris Connors come from? And how did it all happen?
So I'm one of three. I'm the what I would call the rose between two thorns. I have two sisters, and one older and one younger than me. My older sister, she has 9 O levels, 5 A levels, 2 degrees, and
academic.
She's incredibly academic. And my younger sister, again, she was very academic, not quite to that academia achievement, but she is very academic. And I was the middle child, and it was always a bit of a challenge, I think, for my parents, because I left school struggling massively to read and write. So I'm severely dyslexic. And so I always felt as though I didn't quite kind of, I suppose, fit in, or always struggled to be able to achieve. And back then, I would say that we were only really judged, and probably even now, we're only really judged on our academic ability. And when I say academic ability, I mean numbers and words. So there are 9 different smarts, 9 different ways a human being learns. And but we're only really judged on 2 of them when we're at school and when we're at college. That whole system is focused on that. So I never really felt as though I achieved, fitted in at school, because they weren't my skill sets. And it wasn't probably until I left school and went into an industry that didn't rely on those skill sets. I went in to become an apprentice hairdresser, which were allowed on visual, on the visualization of things and working in 3D, that I suddenly found my niche, and suddenly felt that I wasn't inadequate, and realized actually that I was really, I had something to give and to give back to the world. And therefore hairdressing was a lot easier for me, but I applied that same determination that I had in everything. So even in the numbers and the words when I was at school, I always tried my best, but I never got anywhere. Whereas with this, I would still put the maximum amount of effort in, but suddenly I was achieving. And then I realized then that I was good at something. And from that comes confidence. And I think that's probably one of the best gifts you can give a child, is confidence, and to create an environment where they do feel confident. And I felt confident within that environment. And by the time I was 20, I bought my first salon and worked incredibly hard, and then got my first salon. And then I worked at that salon really hard and just, I loved money. I loved because we didn't have much as kids. My parents both worked and struggled, obviously, but we never went without anything. We always were well looked after. But money for me was always about, back then, was always about knowing that I'd done well and I'd achieved. And I used to have a football pools round, for those that can remember what a football pools round was, where I used to go as a 12-year-old, knock on people's doors, give them a football pool, and they give me the money. And I used to do that for my dad, and I had my own little round. I mean, that wouldn't be allowed nowadays. And used to come back and put the money out on the coffee table, and I used to count the money and put it into little piles and see how much we'd actually got. That, and we used to do that every single week. So I sort of ended up having a love for money and actually adding up and making sure that everything was correct and right. And I applied those same kind of things to the business when I first started. And then I bought my second salon at the age of 25, which then went really big, which was in a place called Crawley, Maidenbough, which at the time was the single largest housing development in Europe.
Was it really? Wow.
Yeah. So I was very
interesting.
Lucky.
So when you were doing your football pools,
Yeah.
can you describe? Could you describe two profiles of people that you got to know? I'm just kind of curious to know. You must have had your regulars.
What in terms of the people there was always the people
Any
that I've lived.
standout? Yeah, tell us about a
Very
standout
stressful.
individual.
So
Yeah,
there was always, I don't know about an individual, but it's like two groups. There were the people that lived on council houses, which is what they were called back in the day, probably social housing now, and the
yeah.
people that lived in the really wealthy houses. And the people that lived in the really wealthy houses at Christmas never gave you a penny. And the people
Mm-hmm.
that lived in the social housing always gave you a fiver tip or £2 tip or whatever. And they always seem to be more generous and more kind. They always seem to support and help. Now that's not saying the other people didn't, but you know, you never got anything from them at all. But just barely a sort of grunt and say they couldn't pass the time of day with you. But those other people really did, and that's what I kind of liked. I liked the fact that they might not have much, but they're always willing to share it, and that's maybe why they
Yeah,
didn't have much. But
that's really nice. Well, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing. And I guess it would be you kind of earned your stripes as far as dealing with people. It's good people skills. You know, as a young boy, you got to deal
yeah,
with all these different types of people and kind of got
yeah,
your view on the world. I also like when you talked about you obviously shared that you were severely dyslexic, and you know the one size fits all academic system didn't kind of work for you. But your ability to, can you talk about because I mean Rocket Pod, we like to talk about visionaries. I mean you know you can imagine what a haircut might look like. So you're almost starting. Do you visualize when you're cutting hair? Do you visualize
absolutely,
the finished
100%.
result from the beginning?
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. So I think with anything, well, certainly as far as I'm concerned, with anything, people even used to say to me when I was passing up the rollers, because back in the day that's what you did, and they say, "Oh, you know, what do you want to do once you've done your hairdressing, you know, your apprenticeship?" And I always used to say, "I want to have 5 salons, and this is what I want them to look like." So I knew exactly where I was going, even at that age. And my mum said I was the kind of kid that if I was to be a dustman, I would have ended up owning the dust cart. I was that kind of kid. I always knew where I was going. And in terms of the haircuts, absolutely, I cannot start a haircut until I have a very clear picture right at the front of my head. And sometimes you can go from somebody with curly hair, masses of it, to somebody with really fine hair and not a lot of it. And you can do the consultation, and that, which is the most important part, you can talk through what it is that you're going to do. You come to cut the hair, but the picture's not there. And I just have to stop and just say, oh, just 1 minute. And I just have to wait until that picture comes into my head. Once it's smack bang in the middle of my head there, and then the hands just do the work. The picture just flows through. But it has to be, I can't start it until it's there.
Okay,
until I have that very clear vision.
Interesting. So to get into that flow, you start with a picture, and then I guess you've already touched on it. So you've used that ability to, number one, obviously acquire your first salon, and then you got your second one in Maidenbower, you mentioned, and then I guess since then you've grown to quite a number. I know that, yeah.
We have. So we've grown. So I sold the first one, and then we just had the one, which they made about, and then I opened up another 2. But those salons that were opened up mainly by the people that we're in. So we had very much a sort of ethos about helping youngsters being able to achieve where it is they wanted to go. So again, for me, looking at that visionary part is that every year, all of our youngsters, or everybody within the whole company, we have a group day, and we do a dream board. We cut out pieces of paper from magazines, and we lay down what it is we want to achieve for that year. And then what we do is we then stick that up on the ceiling in the team room, and then they come down once a month, and then we look at how close we are to any of those things that those visions that we've all decided that we want to do, and we tick them off. Or we say, "Oh no, we're a little bit closer to that one," or we're not. And for me, it helps me to understand then what the team actually want to achieve. And I've got it in my head, they've got it in their head, and we're all then traveling on the same path to be able to help them to be able to get where they need to get to. And very much so in terms of some of them will have, and some of them have actually currently got, that they want to own their own salon. And that's wonderful, because if I know where they're going, then I know what I've got to do to get them there, and they know what they've got to do to get themselves to that, and what they've got to earn to make that happen. So we can then break it down for them. And it's about breaking it down. Rather than saying, well, okay, this salon might cost 100,000. Okay, what do I have to save up yearly, monthly, weekly, daily in order to be able to make sure I can hit that target? So most hairdressers, not all, do struggle with words and numbers, and that helps them to turn it into pictures and breaking it down to be able to achieve what it is that they need to be able to get and go where they want to go.
How wonderful! What a great boss.
I don't know. It seems to work with the majority of them.
So why on the ceiling?
It's just somewhere, so it's visual.
Okay. So do you have to lie down? Do you have to lie down?
Yeah, essentially. They just still come down every time. But we just put them up on the ceiling. It's probably the only clear space that we've got.
Very nice. I love it. Okay, so there's a bit of a theme developing here. So then how do you get from? Okay, so you're obviously a successful entrepreneur building salons. And I guess obviously. Motivating your staff, engaging everyone, engaging all the stakeholders. So I guess your customers have to, they help make your salon successful. And then you've got, you mentioned young people. I guess all different. I guess I'm sure you've seen all different types of profiles. In the salon trade. So then how? So then CoCo Foundation. What was the spark? I mean. Because you also talked about your experience in school, but I know CoCo Foundation is doing a lot of work. Or you can talk about it,
sure,
in Africa. So how did that come about?
So to start off with, for us, I can't motivate anybody. I can only create an environment that is motivational, and that's what we look at, is creating that environment, particularly within our academy for our young people, to helping them to be able to achieve what it is they want to achieve. So if you can create that environment, and then those that creative flow then happens, and then it makes it a lot easier to be able to understand what it is they want to do and where it is that they want to go. Now with the dream boards, one young man called Ed, one of our young apprentices, he arrived at our salon with a pair of flip-flops and in a pair of shorts for his interview, and he was a bit of a lad. And he took a bit of casual drugs, not a good thing, but we loved him. He was really good at communicating. He was just a nice, guy, salt of the earth. Anyways, let's travel him forward. He'd done his dream board, and after 2 years, he's finished his apprenticeship. On his dream board, he had a picture of a little African lad standing outside a house. And he said, well, what's this one on here, Ed? And he said, well, I'd love to go to Africa, and I'd love to go and work with some kids. So I just said, well, let's go. And he said, oh, you can't just do that. I said, yes, you can. That's what's on your dream board. Let's make it happen. He said, oh, you can't. And I said, well, let's just, go away and think about it a couple of weeks. And if it's what you want to do, let's make it happen. So it took about 6 weeks. Teenagers sometimes take a while before they come back to you. And he said, I'd really like to go. So we then set about taking the entire academy. At the time, there was 4 youngsters and their trainer, all off to South Africa to go and build a little house, and that's how it kind of started.
Wow, and wow. Okay, so that came from one of your.
That came from one of them. So it wasn't.
Yes, okay.
Certainly wasn't my dream. It was his dream. That's what he wanted to do.
Wow, that's wonderful. So and to be open-minded as well, and to make things happen. It's like you've simplified it. You've simplified it. It's like intention and doing, not just. And I mean, they got the visualization piece. I love the visual. It's almost like it's not a storyboard, but like a visual. Where you're creating a board. And I guess that gets refined over time, and then but actually going ahead and doing it. And obviously, and you've also given credit. You've given credit to Ed, which is it's really nice.
And that's the important bit. That important piece is, at the end of the day, always about the doing. So it's all right putting things down, but it's how do you get there? What do you have to do to make yourself to be able to achieve what it is that you want to achieve? And that's when most people, I think, fail or why they don't achieve because they get hit or knocked, and they don't keep that right at the forefront of their head, right where they need it to say, this is what I still want to do, this is the direction I'm going in. And my job is to encourage and to just push them along and help them along. It's not leading from the front, it's always just helping them to be able to go where they want to go and think about the next step and the next stage, and to break that down. So we looked at how much the trip would cost. And then, it was about then, well, okay, so what are we going to do to make this work? And they put on loads of fundraising events in order to raise the money. And that brought the team closer together, creates that environment of that motivational environment. They had to stand up. And I remember I put them in front of a crowd of about 200 people on stage. And you could see their legs visibly shaking. But that was all about getting them up there and about making a commitment to other people, so that they put it out there, so other people then hold them accountable, yes. Not just me. So it's that accountability piece, that once it's out there in the ether and you tell someone that you're then accountable, and you'll be reminded by those other people. And that's why I love my job, because if I say to people, I want to buy a farm in Uganda, which is something that we did, the next time I see them in 6 weeks' time, they go, have you managed to buy that farm in Uganda yet? They hold me accountable. And that's the beauty of my job with my guests. That I cut their hair, they always hold me accountable, and they'll always ask that question. I think, oh no, I haven't done that, or yeah, I have done that, and we engage in the conversation. So it's that it's having the vision, and it's doing the doing, but it's also being accountable for making sure that you do carry through what it is that you want to do.
Yeah, and then creating that environment for those things, for the magic to happen, so to speak.
Correct. Yeah.
So when you talk about an academy, is that, do you teach hairdressing as well, or is it?
Absolutely. So
salons. Okay.
Yeah, so we do. So within our industry, one of the biggest challenges is, and like in most industries, I think now is being able to find enough people to be able to employ. But we've always taught our own. We've always homegrown our own. So the directors of the company started off as Saturday kids within my company. And that's the piece I absolutely love. I love the fact that you're giving youngsters a hand up, not a hand out. You're helping them to be able to get, and particularly because something from our industry is, oh, you're only a hairdresser, but some of my hairdressers earn over 40,000 a year. Well, they get that because they work incredibly hard. But they'll earn more than teachers and policemen and etc. But they're not viewed as a profession. It's not viewed. It's viewed as almost a secondary or thirdary sort of job. And for me, it's about allowing them to become free, independent people, so that they can purchase their own home by themselves, and they don't have to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or another half to be able to get that. They can be independent of themselves, and that's why for me it's very close to my heart to be able to help them to be able to achieve that and be able to get that independence. I've got a couple of young people that are in their early 20s that have just purchased their first little flat by themselves without somebody else. And for me, once you've got your independence, completely, and you're not beholden to somebody else, then that creates a much healthier environment for yourself, I think, moving forward. You have more choices, and that's what it's about, choice at the end of the day.
Yeah, it definitely creates more options. Well, that's really nice. So you're following your young recruits right up to independence. Some of them go on to starting their own salons, and some of them are kind of on the on the journey with them.
I always say that whoever I meet, any youngster that I meet, has got to end up going through me and ending up as a better person, whatever that better person is to them. So it's not for me to say what it is, but if they come through me, then they've got to end up out the other side. Somebody a better person, and having achieved something that they wanted to achieve or do. At the end of the day.
So when we met, so we haven't known each other. Well, we met several weeks ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I know the subject came at the time. I think I was just celebrating my 10th year of being teetotal.
Yeah.
And I asked you whether you were teetotal. I just had the kind of intuition thing to say, and you said yes. So I was kind of working this idea. So can you talk to me about that? So you don't drink.
No.
Why? How do you think that's impacted your life Have you ever drunk, or what's your story there?
So I had one.
I'm just curious.
That's okay. So how is not drinking impacted my life? It just means you're present. You're present every single day of every waking moment. You've never got that hangover. You never wondered what you did the night before or whatever. You are present. You're fully functional. You don't end up wasting your day. My feeling is that you're not on this planet for very long. And for me, every day, and every minute of that day has to be used in a way that helps you to be able to get where you want to go, or help others to achieve what they want to achieve. And I can only do that by making sure that I don't drink. I did drink once. I got once when I was about 14, when I was on a family holiday, and I was with my dad and family, and I ended up throwing up, with my dad trying to stop me throwing up. And that was my sort of first encounter. And then the second time was when I was 18. I don't know whether you've heard of 12 chimes, where you drink a pint on New Year's Eve of every chime that goes. And I ended up hitting the deck flat on the floor. And that's it. Never done it since.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so you're a lifer. Okay, that's interesting. So, so what else can we talk about? Is there a question that you would like me to ask you?
Again, I'm not sure. I mean, certainly, in terms of the foundation.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose Ed. And once we started that journey together, we went out with the whole group, and we went to South Africa, and took the 36 hours getting there. When we actually got there, we had all these little kids that came running to the gate, and I kind of hadn't, because I suppose it was Ed's vision, not mine. When I stepped out of the 4x4, I had this complete fearful moment that I don't actually like kids. I like teenagers. I like adults, but little kids. And I suddenly realized I was going to be there for 3 weeks with these little kids all around me. But it just so happened they didn't like me either. And they kind of took all the teenagers' hands, and they left me standing there like Billy No Mates. But one of the challenges there is that I believed before I went that the children had obviously got HIV, and they'd got their HIV through their mums passing away and getting them the disease. But that wasn't true. They'd actually received, or they'd been born without HIV. And you kind of think, well, how did that happen? And then you realise that all the kids that were standing in front of us had all been abused. And that's how they got their HIV. So as the only adult male going in to that environment, they didn't like me. But there was one little lad, and he was sort of sitting there with an orange squash bottle, and it had a load of dust in the bottom and a pipe coming out the top. And he'd give it a smack, and this dust would just go all over his face. So I thought, I'll go and talk to him. So I sort of went up to him. And as I went up to him, he just got up, disappeared around the corner, and that was it. And I thought, I'll come back in a minute. So I waited, and he didn't. So I went round the corner, and there's this grass verge, and there's a tree underneath a tree at the bottom of the grass verge, and he was sitting under the tree smacking this on a squash bottle. And I thought, well, I'll have another go. I'll go and chat to him. And as I walked towards him, I realised he wasn't laughing. He was crying. I was like, there's no way I can deal with a kid that's crying. I wouldn't even know what to do. I don't have kids. So I started to walk away, but he looked at me, and I thought at the same time, there's no way I can walk away from him. So I went down, I sat next to him, and I put out my hand and shook his hand and said, hello, my name's Chris. I said, what's yours? And he said, my name's Tabisaw. So I said, can I sit next to you, Tabisaw? And he said, yes. So I sat down next to him, and I sort of wiped up his tears, reached out to wipe up his tears. But I created this complete mud mess on his face from the dust and the water, and then started to panic, thinking, could I get AIDS? Because back then I had no idea at all. And then I realised that actually as a kid, all he wanted was probably a hug. So I said, do you want a hug, Tabisaw? So he said, yes, climbed on my lap and gave me a squeeze. And I said, look, I'm going to be here for the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be building a building for you and your friends. I said, do you want to give me a hand? And he said, yes, Chris. So I was like, result, I've got a friend. So I just stood up in my usual fashion, walked up the hill. And the next thing I knew, I had this little hand inside mine, and he became my next best friend. The next morning, there was a very loud knock on the door. And as I opened it up, there he was with my water bottle that he filled up from a puddle. And and he said, are we ready to work? So I pinched the water bottle, gave it a clean because I didn't get a chippy tummy. And we set to work, and we had to knock down part of the building, or the students did, the team did, and then they'd fill up my wheelbarrow, and they took great delight in seeing piling all this rubble on this wheelbarrow and seeing their boss running up the hill with this wheelbarrow, absolutely exhausted, emptying the rubble out. And then Tavistock would jump in it, and he'd sort of do a little raspberry face to all these friends as I went back down again. And this went on all day long. And we then went the following day. The lady who owned the children's home said, "Could we go and visit some children in the hospital?" And I said, "I'd love to." And we took some little teddy bears with us. And we'd given out all these teddy bears, but there was one lad that was all by himself, and he was right at the very end of the ward. And I said to the nurse, "Can I go and see him?" And she said, "You can." She said, "Just be careful. He has full-blown AIDS." So I started to walk towards him, and Ed shouts to me, "Does he want a teddy bear?" And I said, "Ed," I said, "he's not going to want a teddy bear. He's 12 years old." And but as I'm looking at him, he's looking through me at something, and I look behind me, and Ed's swinging a teddy bear. And I said, "Ed, I've got this one wrong. He wants a little teddy bear." So Ed gave him a teddy bear, and we stayed with him, spoke to him for about half an hour. He said nothing in that half an hour. And then we said, "Look, we're going to come back tomorrow." We both went to the door, Ed and me, to leave. And then we suddenly heard, "Goodbye." We both ran back and went, "You can speak English, can't you?" And he goes, a big cheesy smile. But he was 12 years old, and he weighed just under half a stone.
Wow, really?
And
oh my goodness.
He was obviously on his, on knocking on death's door. And I said to the nurse, I said, "What's his name?" And she said, "His name's Tavistock, the same name as the little boy that was back in the children's home." And you kind of then understood his potential journey, but all that stuff that's going on in your head is your stuff. You've got to bag it, box it, and leave it by the gate. Because when you go in and you see the big smiley face of the Tavistock that's in the children's home right now, today, this minute, you've got to make it the best possible day you can make it for him. Anyways, after spending 3 weeks there, I was sort of sitting down on a bench, and I had Tavistock one side and another kid, Bongo, the other. And, I said, "We're going home today." And both of them burst into tears. And I was like, "What's the matter, guys? We've been here, we've built your house, we've pushed on a swing to our arms are going to drop off. We've fed you, we've read you stories. We've done all these things. What's the matter?" And they said, "We're never going to see you again." And that was it. I suddenly felt as I got hit by a 10-ton truck. I came home and was getting my shopping, because first thing I have to do is go shopping, because I live by myself. I had to leave my trolley, had a complete breakdown. I then picked up a Chinese, sat on the sofa, emptied the Chinese out, and had another wobble. Went in the next day, and all these wonderful guests that hold you accountable said, "How was Africa?" And I just couldn't talk to them. So I had to go in the end and see a head shrink, because I was in a mess. And so I went and saw a head shrink, and after a little while seeing that person, I just woke up one morning. I said, "Do you know what? I've got to do what I do best, do the doing, and I've got to keep my promise." Because I said to the kids to stop them crying. "I'll see you in August." So I set about running up and down the country, inspiring loads of other youngsters, and we went back out again, and we built a reservoir. And then I came back from that trip, and I was pretty much in the same place, but I had already promised the community that I would build a massive village hall. So I went up and down the country, talking to loads of youngsters, inspiring them to be able to come out again and painting that, I suppose, that vision, that picture of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then they came on board. We went out for 6 weeks and built this huge village hall. And in that time, it gave me the opportunity to get out into the KwaZulu-Natal region and the area. There are between 9,000 and 15,000 orphans. There's about 60% of the adult population got wiped out by AIDS. And it just left maybe a 12-year-old looking after an 8-year-old looking after a 4-year-old. And that 12-year-old is in the house. So they're the mum and the dad. And as a human being, we need our basic needs met. And that is, we need shelter, we need food, and we need water. And if those basic things aren't met, then we don't have choice. So if I blew your house up here now, you wouldn't be sitting here chatting to me. You'd be finding out which sofa you're going to sleep on tonight. The mere fact that you have a house gives you choice, and gives me choice to be able to come on this podcast and to be able to talk. So what I understood very quickly is that they didn't have choice. These kids didn't have any choice. They were literally surviving. They'd be chewing on a goat's head, calling with maggots, and that would be breakfast, dinner, and lunch. or breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's the dyslexicness in me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided I needed to do something about it. And that's when I got back and formed the CoCo's Foundation. We have
Okay.
a Food for Life project, which has supplied 2.6 million meals up the east coast of
2.6.
Africa.
Wow.
Yeah. Then
Incredible.
we also have our Close for Close project. The Food for Life project, everybody that we meet, we ask them to donate just £2 a month. That £2 a month will feed 40 children.
Mm.
And but what we guarantee is that every single penny, every penny that is raised through the charity, 100% of it will hit target. So I'm in a very fortunate position that I cut hair, and it's hair and my company that pick up the administration cost of running the charity. So if you give me £1 or £2, the whole £2 will go where it's supposed to go. I am
Yeah.
entitled to take 49p of that pound. So if we raised £1 million, I could pay myself 499,000. I could pay myself. I'd be allowed to legally, but it doesn't. Every penny goes to where it's supposed to go, and that's what allows us to be able to feed so many. Then our Close for Clothes project, we take secondhand clothes and we sell them on eBay, and then through that we buy school uniforms, and we manage to get all the kids without any parents to school, so they can get an education, because without the education they won't get out of poverty. Now what I find quite ironic is that for somebody who struggled in education tremendously and didn't really like school or want to go to school, it's done that full circle on me, that I understand that out there is education that will help to get them out of poverty. And then we also have our Build for the Future program. Now, our Build for the Future program is where we take volunteers, and we take mainly volunteers that are challenged, youngsters that are challenged from the UK, but not just youngsters. On our next trip, we've got 2 people that are in their late 70s coming, and they build a house for an orphan family or child-headed. And it's a bit like me coming along and saying, I'm going to build you £1 million house. They live in horrific conditions. And we then go and build them this house. It's a 17-day trip. And on that trip, it doesn't just change the lives of the children that we're building, it also change the lives of the people that are on the trip as well, because their eyes are opened up to, kind of what's possible. And very much for the youngsters that we have that come on the trip that believe necessarily they haven't got support and help in this country, it helps them to realize that they do have a house, they do have food, they do have clothing and water, and therefore they do have choice. Whereas a lot of those kids there don't have those things. And then lastly, our Skills for Life project, which is that last bit of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid hierarchy of needs.
Yeah,
is that once your basic need is met, it's then about self-sufficiency and about investing in yourself. And I kind of guess that's where we're at with our young hairdressers. Their basic needs are always met, but it is also then about helping them to become self-sufficient. And for them, it's helping young people over there to become self-sufficient. So we've just brought over a young lad that we've known since he was 10 years old at one of our feeding stations. He's now 19 years old, and he's just trained to be a commercial scuba diver. And we brought him over, and he went down to CDT in Cornwall, and he did a 3-month course down there. And he was over here for 6 months. He stayed for Christmas, and I took him back in January, and he's had a job offer up in the Shetlands, and he's going from living in quite humble beginnings to now he's going to be probably earning between 30 and 40,000 a year. And that's that piece about giving another human being a hand up, not a hand out. And also for me, it's been the voice for the child that can't be heard. A lot of the kids that we work with have been abused, and it's helping them to be able to get where they need to get to and be able to do what it is that they want to do, and giving them that environment again where I can't motivate them, but I can create an environment that is motivational to help them to be able to achieve what it is they want to achieve.
Yeah, well, that's a very powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing. I
That's
think,
okay.
when we met, I think what resonated with me, I mean, obviously it's a fantastic, inspiring, it's incredible what you've done. I think the fact that you're you're putting 100% of the donations to work. You could take, like you said, 49p out of every pound, but you choose not to. And obviously, I think one of the things that I've struggled with in the past, as far as donating to charities, is that knowing that a lot of it goes on operations and big salaries, and it's you never really know as the donor, what actually gets to the people in need. And
I think that is the piece about that. If you look at donating as a circle, that last quarter is the bit that we don't really understand where it goes. And for us, we go and do talks in schools, and even to the little kid that might be a 6-year-old in an English school that gives me a key ring with a little elephant on, I'll make sure it goes to Africa, and I'll do a little video of me giving it to somebody so that the kid can see that it's arrived at where it's supposed to go and its destination. And for me, that's the most important thing, is that we give, but we don't often know where our giving goes. And it's important to understand where it goes, and important to understand that it truly is helping. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, how do you create a vision with an end, or with any kind of direction?
So on this build project that you talked about, actually, before we joined on the podcast, my daughter Penelope, who's sitting over there, I'll just whiz around.
Hi, Penelope. She's going to kill you now.
Said hi.
Hiya.
She's interested in coming out to Africa, and I will sponsor her, and I'm sure she's got a friend or two that could probably join her. But no, I'd love to, if that's something that is available to Penelope, come and help. She's 17, so I know whether she's too young or
no. She's no, not at all. We've taken as young as 14. I think next year we've got the Girl Guides coming out, a group. There's 15 of them coming out, and they're 14 upwards. But what we say is that a trip costs 2,800, of which, as of a charity, we only take 600 of that. Now, the 600 that we take, we have 8 people on a trip, and that gives us then the 4,500, 600 that it costs to build the house.
Okay.
What we do say to the parent or the youngster is that they have to raise that 600, preferably, because when you hand the keys over to the kid, you understand that you've actually worked hard to make that happen, as opposed to mum or dad, auntie, grandma, or whoever, just writing a check out and giving it to you.
Yeah.
The rest of the money, the 2,200, is your flights, your accommodation, your food. We do go on a safari on the middle weekend, but that's part of the journey. And we can say if the parent wants to pay for that, that's fine. But it's really important that the young person does something back in their own community to be able to earn that 600, because that's part of their life journey. That's part of them understanding that they've got to work for it. They can't just be given it. And for them to do some kind of sponsor, whatever, to be able to raise that money, to feel that when they hand the keys over, they're gifting it, not their parents, nobody else. They're actually gifting it to the child, and that has a massive impact on them.
Okay, no, that's okay. Well, I'll send the recording. So Penelope can't hear you because I got my earpods in.
That's okay.
Okay, that's good. So I'd love to help spread the word. I'm definitely going to sign up to your the £2 a month thing. Is actually a really nice thing, because it's who can't afford. We're privileged. Even listening to you talk, we're so privileged living in a Western society. A lot of people take it. We're guilty as charged. Probably take it for granted sometimes, but we are so privileged. When you visit some of these developing countries, and there's a lot of poverty, and these kids, it's like, as long as they have food, they can, like you said, they have options. Just an education. Again, something very basic that we take for granted, but it's
I think amazing. As well that the thing about the £2 is that when you do gift it, we spend nothing on saying thank you very much to you. We leave that up to you. So if you jump onto our website, if you jump onto our Facebook page, you'll get the thank yous, but we're not going to post anything out independently to you. And the reason for that is it costs us money, and that money's got to come from somewhere, and we're not taking it out of the £2 that's going to be feeding those 40 kids. So, for us, you can find out the information and the thank yous, but all you'll know is each month you just get that warm feeling in your heart knowing that you've fed 40 kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you can feed 40 children for £2.
Yeah.
So and you're asking donors to commit to £2 a month, which is what, 24 quid a year. That's a few coffees. And with that, they can actually, what's that? 12 times 40, 40 times 12. I don't know. It's quite a few kids. It's quite a few meals, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the number of meals.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the number?
I'd have to get a calculator.
480. 480.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
480. That's dyslexic in me.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, and that makes a big, big impact on a kid, because if a kid goes into school and they're hungry, they're not thinking about their education. And where we do feed within schools, the schools notice and they're screaming out for is to feed the kids before they go to school, is that their education, their concentration goes up. I mean, if you're hungry, you're going to get something to eat to make sure you can focus on it rather than focusing on being hungry. And it's the same for them. Exactly the same for them.
So, that's brilliant. Really enjoying this chat. Sorry about the dogs.
Doesn't matter.
Just wait. Can you hear the dogs? I don't know whether you can hear on this.
No, they're all right. You're right.
Okay, so as far as if you any books that you can recommend that have had an impact on you in the last 10 years that you've read? I don't know whether you're much of a reader. No,
that's a really hard one.
Okay. Or podcast, could be a podcast, could be anything.
Well, I don't do a lot of the reading's a hard one. It takes me about a year to read one book. I've only just got into the podcasting bit, and you're going to kill me. Stephen Bartlett is one that I will probably just listen to. And you sometimes get little quotes.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, little ideas of being able to to be able to help. But I'm not a reader at all. I mean, there are some books but if you ask me straight off what the titles are, I don't even know I can remember them. But I it's mainly about, for me, and it always has been, it's about conversation. It's about people. It's about, entering into conversation. I'll probably get more from conversations with people than I do, from anything else. And whenever you meet somebody, be it that you're out, most people don't talk to each other, but I'm somebody, if you do end up, walking down the street with me, I will engage with you, because I just find it fascinating about what people do, where they go, like you do with this podcast, I suppose, where they've been, how they got there. And I just love that. And understanding successful people, how they get to where they get to. They kind of leave the breadcrumbs of how they got to where they get to, and all you got to do is just follow those breadcrumbs, and just understand. But it's about having that very clear vision, clear picture, which for somebody who deals in pictures is probably a lot easier. I'm not very good at detail, so you probably understood that from when you were texting me and emailing me. But I have a team behind of me that deals with all that detail. So they are people that are words and they are numbers, and they're really good at all that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm just not. So they I come up with an idea and I chuck it behind me, and they then get to work on it, and it's them that bring it alive. So all of this stuff can't happen without surrounding yourself and leaning into those people that often are the opposite to what you are. And so I always say, never be ashamed of what you can do, but also, more importantly, what you can't do. And if you can't do it, find somebody who can and lean into them and get them to be able to help you to be able to get where you want to, be able to get to. Because, I think there's that quote, isn't it? If you want to go far, you go together. If you want to go a short distance, you go alone. Or something like that. And and that is so true, because if you do want to do something, then you've got to engage others, you've got to inspire others, you've got to help them be able to get the same clarity as you have of your picture, of their picture. So they've got to have a reason, and it's got to be good for both. It's got to be good for them, it's got to be good for you. If that's out of balance, then it's not going to last. It won't last. It has to be good for you both at the right time to be able to move something forward. But it's only through conversation, which is something that we don't do much nowadays. I mean, something that the phones, that makes us look inward and not outward. And I suppose that's a book, actually. Stolen Focus. That was a really good book I read recently.
Hey! Yeah.
I got there eventually. You
did.
That was about inward looking and not outward looking. And you can only solve the world's problems, probably your own, by outward looking and leaning into others. If all you're doing is on your phone looking down all the time, then you're just going to be inward. And that's why I think a lot of challenges that we have with mental health and all that is because everybody's looking down, they're not looking up and out, and they're not engaging in conversation, and that's important. So
yeah, that's really important. No, it's so true. So I think well, it's really good. You've clearly got a growth mindset. You're clearly a visionary, and you're a doer. And I can imagine, being in your trade, you get to speak to a lot of people. You're the folks that you're cutting your hair. I mean, you must have some great conversations and a big cross section of life.
Yeah, and I guess some wonderful guests that have done and do amazing things. And some that in their own way do amazing things, as well. So yeah, absolutely. I'm very privileged, I always say, and I know the ones that I can lead into for some things and not for others, and etc. And that it's understanding people's skill sets, and how you can get where you want to get to, making sure that they're around you and helping you, supporting you.
Yeah, there's also seasons, isn't there? I mean, like any relationship or any collaboration, it's Absolutely. Like you ride the wave, and you'll sometimes that you might catch another wave, or it's like you have an engagement with an individual, and it's just accepting that was wonderful and magical, but that's now gone. I guess relationships are like that. Some stick around, some you just have to enjoy it while you're having the
it's about time. Balance. It's those scales. It's about balance. So all the time.
So just trying to think. So how do people? In fact, I was going to say I guess we're coming to. In fact, I don't know what time? How we're doing? How we're doing for time? So how do people find the CoCo Foundation?
So visit us at the website, which is www.cocosfoundation.co.uk. We are just about to have a major revamp of our website as well. But yeah, visit there, and you can always find us on Facebook as well. Facebook tends to be the everyday stories about what's happening with the kids and what we're doing, and we're just about to go on a trip, so we're introducing all of our volunteers that are on that trip, and then etc. So that's kind of the little community that we have, which is fantastic. But just come and get involved. Ping us an email at info@cocosfoundation.co.uk if you want to get involved in some way, shape or form. If you want to hold an event for us and raise some money for a house, we're always looking for ambassadors. When I say ambassadors, that's as an individual or as a company. So a company could raise money to build a house for, $4,500, and I'll quite happily come and do a talk to different companies around the UK to inspire, the people that you work with. And as an individual, you can sponsor a child, you can just donate £2 a month. You can sell clothes on eBay and then send us the money, but we'll always guarantee that the money will go where it's supposed to go. But just get in contact with us, because without getting in contact with us, we're not starting a conversation, and that's what we need to do. We need to talk, and I'll ring you up, we'll have a chat and see what your skill set is. And it's about talking, it's about engaging, and to be able to understand what it is that you want to do. It's all well and good typing and emailing, etc., but sometimes a good old chat, a good old chinwag, you never know where that might take us. So that's what's good.
Yeah, that's great. I would actually like to, as the kind of the podcast evolves, I would like to connect the guests with the listeners, and maybe even connect some of the guests together as well. And I've started doing that. Sure. And I guess the offer's there. I mean, if there's anything that Rocket Pod can do, if there's any guests that I've interviewed that you would like to be connected with, then reach out here. But I think, if you're up for it, perhaps we could have you come along and we can do some. Rocket Pod can do an event at some point, and you can come along if you're around. So if you could meet anyone for coffee or a tea, who would it be? Any ideas? Anyone you want to sit down and have a chat?
Nelson Mandela. 100% would be Nelson Mandela. He was born in the probably the right time, but equally I always feel as though there was so much more that could have been done for South Africa and Africa, and I think it's going through a hugely challenging time at the moment. And just his words of wisdom. So Nelson Mandela, and the other one that a lot of people say as well is Gandhi. Because again, that's somebody of wisdom. And also Barack Obama. I'd love to be able to talk, because I think he's a thinker. I like thinkers. I like people that don't always give you the answer straight away, but they sort of think it through, but again, somebody who's very wise. So there's 3 people.
Yeah, and one you never know. I mean, Barack, he's still alive and kicking in these.
He's still going.
Well, if I can get him on the podcast, perhaps we can co-interview him. We can both interview him. Brilliant. Well, I really enjoyed this. I think. I'll tell you what. I've got a final piece. So, cool. If there's any parting wisdom, for our listeners, and bearing in mind our listeners are reasonably young, I would say 18 to 30 at most. I mean, there are folks our age as well, in their 40s. But what would that parting wisdom be, just from your life experiences? And do you have any pearl of wisdom that you can close with?
I would say get involved. Get involved with with charity, with the community. It doesn't matter whether it's with us or with any other charity. Get involved. Giving back comes back to you in absolute handfuls. And it also teaches you so much. But it is that we can't do these things alone. Just get involved and put your phone down for 5 or 10 minutes and talk to the people around you, because I think it's something that we just don't do enough of. You and I would not be having this conversation if we hadn't meted at the gym, because that's where we met. And hi, how long you been here? Oh, I've been a member here for whatever, and then boom, we're started, and then you're off. Don't be worried about speaking to the person next to you. And I think we always are. I think youngsters in particular always are. And we certainly find within our industry that when youngsters come out of school, we have to take them through a 10-week program of being able to communicate. And how do you communicate? Because they're losing the art of communication. Everything's done through the screen, and everything's inward and rather than the outward. And particularly for the youngsters, that, again, what I look for when I'm employing someone is attitude, a positive attitude, a smile. I cannot train somebody to smile, but I can train them to cut hair. So I can take anybody and train them to cut hair, but I can't train you to smile. So, it is having that positive, and being able and smile and being outwardly, showing that you're happy, because that can't be taught. So attitude, positive attitude with a smile.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
very good. No, that's great. No, cool. I think it's been great. Well, thank you so much for
my pleasure.
Your time, and it's been really insightful. And hopefully we can catch up in a few years and see where see how CoCo Foundation's doing, and perhaps by that time we'll have raised a bit of money and helped you on your journey. But no, it's very inspiring. Chris, thank you so much.
James.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Rocket Pod. When you get a moment, we'd love it if you could jump over to whatever platform you're listening to the Rocket Pod on and leave a quick review. We love your messages. It helps us get exposure to inspire and share more stories like this one with Chris today. A couple of key takeaways from Chris. Just goes to show, one man or one woman or one individual can make such a difference to leave the world in a better place. Give a hand up rather than a hand out. Folks have all the answers themselves, and it's just providing an environment that creates options for folks. Love the visualization board idea in his own business, helping people achieve their dreams. And obviously the CoCo Foundation delivering 2.6 million meals in a decade is quite remarkable. So loved having Chris on the show today. Thanks, Chris. You've been very inspiring. And check out the CoCo Foundation. Take care. Have a great week ahead. Bye-bye.